Hello fishing friends, this is Matthew with Outfishing 13 bringing you another Zebco reel repair and service video. Today we're going to be working on this Zebco Omega. A patron sent this to me and he described the problem as being with the drag. Even when it's loose, it's not spooling out very well. So let's dig into this, find out the problem, get it serviced, and back to him in tip-top shape. Let's get started. Okay, here's our Zebco Omega. To do the service on this, you're only going to need a few tools. One of the things you're going to need is a small Phillips screwdriver. You're going to need a large flat screwdriver. You may need a pair of needle nose pliers. When we're putting it back together, we're going to need some reel grease. I've got this pin, precision reel grease. I also have some oil. You want to have some good fishing reel oil, and I have this Lucas oil product. Okay. Now for this particular repair, you may need to order a part, all one assembly that can't come apart, and it's the drag system and oscillating system, and the part number on this is QE3189-01, and you can still order these from Zebco.com. We also want to look at the nose cone or the spinner cone, and that part is QE310-03. We may need to replace this if the pins aren't poking out far enough to catch the line. We'll just have to take a look at that. I'm not saying that we're going to replace this with this part, but we may need to. But what I want to do, instead of replacing the drag system, what I want to look at is how to service it, because it's all one assembly and it can't come apart, where you can grease and re-oil the drag washers. The first thing that we need to do is on any Zebcos, we need to take the front nose cone off. And that just comes apart by spinning. You'll also want to push in the button here to retract the pickup pin. So we want to take this off. We definitely want to clean that up. And you need to remove this spool, you need to tighten the drag, or else the drag just, there we go there. There's something going on in there. The drag is so tight. Okay, and that's all the way tightened up, and that's all the way loosened up. So we're not sure what's going on there, so we're going to have to take a look at that. Let's go ahead and remove the handle. We have this little cover plate here, so just loosen that up. I can feel that it got grit and sand in there, so we want to make sure that gets cleaned up well. Okay, and then we can handle the hands yourself. Okay, this is where you're going to need your little screwdriver. There's two little Phillips screws in here, okay? So the back cover comes off, and then this drag wheel will come off, and then let's just shake out those little screws. So just looking inside here, everything looks pretty good, but it hasn't been serviced, I can see, for a long time. There's hardly any grease on here, which is okay. We're gonna take care of that. Now, in order to take the drag system off, we have to take off this oscillator, because the whole system oscillates back and forth like this. So let's take the drag out. For that, you'll need a larger screwdriver. It goes right in here. And what you want to do is you want to push this in to get that oscillator screw where you can get at it. And it should be pretty easy to come off. If for some reason you can't get it off with just a small amount of pressure, I would suggest using some heat, like a hair dryer or a heat gun, just a little bit of heat to try loosening it up, because if water does get in here and these corrode, you can break this little brass screw off here, and then you have to order a new oscillator and a new screw. And I have done that before. So let's take this apart here and see if we can determine what's going on. because this is where the root of the problem is. Now on this system here, when you turn it this way, it tightens it up. When you turn it this way, it loosens it up. And you should be able to grab onto this here and turn it, but it's so tight. And I just wonder if it just has run out of grease in there. So I have a trick that I want to do, and that is I'm going to heat it up and drop some oil in there, and that oil will have a tendency to go down into all those washers down there. It's hard to see them, but the washers I'm talking about are right down in here. Okay, and because this is all riveted together, it can't come apart, which is kind of a drag. Let me take a minute and compare it to the one that I have. So here's a brand new part. We're going to compare this, how this one functions, to this one. So if I was to take this one right here, and it's already all the way loose, okay, see that? Let's loosen this one all the way up. Okay, that's all the way loose. See how easy that one spins right there? And then this one right here, it's so tight. And we may need to, if I can't get this one to go nice and loose, we're just going to replace it with this one right here. So with my heat gun, I'm going to go ahead and heat up the back of this assembly, the drag assembly. And what I want to do is I want to heat up the metal parts, get it warm enough so that when I come back here, you can see right down in here, this is where the drag washers are. And I'm going to get some of my Lucas oil down in there and attempt to get some oil down in there, spin that around so that we have oil between the drag plates and the drag washers to see if we can get this moving. Because as it is, with it loosened all the way, it's just not moving very well. I think with some oil, we're going to get it moving better. So that's heating up nicely. I want to let that heat soak in and penetrate all the way through there. So I'm going to let it rest a little bit. Let's see what we can do here. It's pretty warm to the touch. Let's put our spool on here so it's easier to turn. And we'll, oh yeah, that's already helped it a lot. So, you know, that's pretty good, but I don't know if it's really good enough. It's moving a lot easier than it was before. I'm going to work at this a little bit longer to see if I can really get it working well. Okay, after heating this up and applying some oil, getting some oil down in there, the drag is still really tight, even all the way loose. So I can kind of feel that there's something in there going on. Maybe the drag washers have been damaged and it's just not engaging properly and loosening up. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this part. Again, here's the part number. It's a QE3189-01, and this is good for both the Omega and the Omega Pro. So let's continue with the reel and finish taking it apart and getting everything serviced on it. What we want to do first is we want to take out this bearing and this bearing and get this main crank gear out. So just carefully push those washers out of the way. Then you can remove that right out, just like that. So this is the oscillator right here. This one has a solid brass gear on it. So we just want to take that apart so we can clean it up. We want to take and get these little bearings the rest of the way out so that we can take and service those with some new fresh oil. Then to take this centerpiece out and service it, we need to take out these two little screws right here. And then we can take this out. If it had grit in it, this isn't so bad, so we're just going to wipe it down with a cloth and then clean up our parts, wipe them down, get them oiled, and start reassembling it. I'll be right back. All right, I got all my parts cleaned up. I'm ready to put it back together. When we put it back together, we're going to use this new drag assembly so that the drag is nice and smooth and loose when it's loose and tight when it's tight. So we're going to start, first thing we're going to start with is getting the main shaft put back together here and put in. Now we need to make sure that we get the anterior reverse drag and the front nose bearing put in. To put this in, I'm going to, the first thing I want to do is, because these are shielded bearings, I want to make sure it gets a little bit of oil that goes all the way into it. So I'm going to do that for the nose bearing, for this bearing here. And then I'm going to get a little bit of grease inside this AR bearing right here. Just a little bit put inside there and work that in. Just like this. Okay, perfect. That's all we really need in there. So I want to put this in the front here. And remember this part right here, not the part that's rounded, but the part that right there just goes in first and drops down those slots. And then this bearing can go in right here. Just get that seated in all the way. That's all it needs. And then we want a little bit of oil on this main shaft bearing. So we're going to oil that up and let it soak in. And get this put in. And get that all the way put in there. And then we have two little screws that hold this shaft in here. So these can be a little bit fiddly, but just work with them and get your little Phillips screwdriver and get those put in. Okay, now that we have that in, working nicely, we'll go ahead and get the center shaft put in. And then once we have the center shaft put in, we'll grease everything up. So we want to make sure, this right here is the oscillator, so we want to make sure we got the oscillator on there. So the oscillator goes on just like that. And we're going to apply just a little bit of oil. Just like that. And then the oscillator and the shaft go in. And one of the things you'll notice is the oscillator has a little groove that it locks into place right there. But you don't need to worry about it until you get the plate, the back cover put on. All right, so we have that in place there. We need to get these bearings put in. We already oiled them up, so we just need to get them put into place and seated on there. So this can be a little bit tricky, but we want to get those bearings all the way up against the shoulder of the center shaft. So we need to get those seated just a little bit more, and then that will be done. Okay, that's finished there. So now we're ready to put a new assembly on, and it doesn't need any grease. It's already fully greased and oiled when it comes from Zebco. So all we need to do here is we do want to take and put some oil on the shafts here, and here, and then put this on. And then we want to apply a little bit of oil to this surface here. And then we want to put a little oil here. And then we can put this little screw back together. And you just snug this one all the way down because it has a shoulder on there, has a little spring washer on there, and you just snug it on there, and that's all. We're ready to put some grease on this right here. On this little pin right there that goes into the back cover. Okay. And then we got the screws to put in. And tighten those down. Using your little screwdriver. Okay. And this is nice and loose. And when we tighten it up, you can tell it gets much tighter. Loose it all the way up, it'll be nice and loose. Okay, the next thing to do is to put the spool on. Now the instructions say to remove spool, tighten drag. So we're putting the spool back on, so we don't need to do anything. Then put our spinner cone assembly back on there. And I want to just apply a little bit of oil to each one of these hinges. Like that, and I want to put a little bit of grease right in the center, like so. Not very much, just enough. I can put some right on here as well, and put that back on there. Okay, and then we're going to put the handle on. The handle was on the right here, so we're going to put it back in the same place. Yeah, sounding a lot better. I want to look at those pickup pins. Yeah, and it's working great. Now there's one more thing that you need to oil on these Omegas, and it's got a little hole right there, a little hole right there. And believe it or not, these Omegas actually have bearings on the handle. So I'm going to take this cap off here, because it'll just make it easier to oil those bearings. So just pop that out there. But down below there, it's hard to see, but it has a bearing in the handle. This is how this can be like a 5 bearing reel. So we're just going to put a little bit of a drop of oil down in here, and a drop of oil down in here, and we're going to put these caps back on. And just snap them down in place. They got a little groove. Make sure that they're there so they don't fall out. Push the button, and then put your front cone back together tighten it up, and that's good to go. Work those handles a little bit. Get that oil in there. Okay, there you go, everybody. That's how to service and repair a drag on a Zebco Omega. This also would apply to a Zebco Omega Pro. The Omega Pro is just a little bit different. It's a little bit wider, but everything else is basically the same. Anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure you comment below. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and watch all my other Zebco repair and service videos. If you have a request, please let me know. It's about fishing time, so I'm getting excited about that. So get your gear out and get it all serviced and ready to go so you have a great time on the water the next time you go. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye.